Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 16 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be turkey thighs with the skin, and today's going to be a back training day. And right now, I'm going to be taking you through the full stretching routine that you're going to perform after you finish training back. Now let's get started. And this brings us to the stretching routine. For the stretching routine, I've got 3 stretches for you guys. We're going to be doing one for the rhomboids, one for the latissimus dorsi, and one for the triceps brachii group. The reason we're going to be doing the rhomboids is because we did a lot of rhomboid work today. Every single exercise involved scapular retraction and depression. And then with regard to the rhomboids, what we're going to be doing for this one is a PNF stretching exercise for the rhomboids. So I'm going to be using the strength bands. You could use some yoga straps, or if you have nothing available, you could just find something to anchor onto, and you could use your anchor point to do your PNF. But for me, I've got the strength bands. What you want to do, if you are using strength bands, we're going to do this as a bilateral exercise. So we're going to do both sides at the same time. You want to come back so that you can protract the scapula as much as you can. You want to create as much separation in your back. Then you want to contract for 6 seconds. So you're going to inhale, squeeze those shoulder blades together. After 6 seconds has passed, what you're going to do is exhale, relax, get deeper into it, and then lean back a little bit more. So you want to get even more of a stretch. We're going to hold it in this position for 10 seconds. Once 10 seconds has passed, we're going to inhale, really squeeze those shoulder blades together. We're going to hold that for 6 seconds. After 6 seconds has passed, we're going to exhale and relax. And sink deeper into the stretch. Really try and separate those shoulder blades as much as you can. And then one final pass. We're going to inhale. Really focus on squeezing those shoulder blades together. After 6 seconds, we are going to exhale, relax. Come back. And on this final pass, we are going to hold it for 20 seconds. So on this last one, you really want to try and protract the scapula as much as possible. So try and create as much separation between the scapula and the spine. And that feels like it was about 20 seconds, maybe even a little bit longer. So that is it for the PNF stretching exercise for the rhomboids major. The second exercise is going to be for the latissimus dorsi muscle. We're stretching the latissimus dorsi because every single exercise we've been hammering the latissimus dorsi. We worked on it when we did focus on the shoulder extension. We focused on it when we did the coronal plane adduction, and to some extent we were even getting a little bit when we were doing the reverse cable flies. Not quite as much, but still got a little bit. For the latissimus dorsi stretch, we're going to be doing a myofascial stretching exercise for the latissimus dorsi. For this one, we want to be in a half kneeling position. So imagine you are in the bottom position of a lunge. Whatever knee is on the ground, that is going to be the side of the latissimus dorsi that we are stretching. So for me, I'm going to place my right knee on the ground, so I'm going to be stretching my right lat first. The way that we want to do this, you guys should know this one because we've done this a couple of times. The lat, what is it responsible for? Extension, medial rotation, and adduction. So we want to do the opposite. We want to go into flexion, lateral rotation, and abduction. So we're going to take our arm, bring it up and over our head, and then with the opposite arm, we're going to pull across. The other thing is we want to create maximum myofascial tension along the entire posterior chain. The latissimus dorsi attaches to the thoracolumbar fascia. The thoracolumbar fascia attaches to the pelvis. So to create extra tension, we want to maintain retroversion of the pelvis. So you are going to tuck your pelvis underneath you. Then the other thing is when we are up and overhead, the lat, aside from just doing shoulder extension, medial rotation, and adduction, the other thing too is it's going to be responsible for ipsilateral trunk flexion. So it's going to bend us toward the side of the arm. So what we want to do to counteract that is we are going to go into contralateral flexion of the trunk. And then to enhance the stretch, we are going to go into ipsilateral rotation by looking toward the side that we're stretching. So it's arm up and overhead. You're going to pull across, project your arm back to get as much flexion. We're going to side bend away, so we're doing a contralateral flexion, ipsilateral rotation by rotating toward the side that we're stretching. But we've got 30 seconds starting right now. So really focus on pulling the elbow across and pushing the elbow back behind you as much as you can. Try and get into as much abduction and try and get into as much flexion as you can. And then as an added bonus, what you could do is similar to with the triceps stretch, you could project your elbow superiorly. So imagine that you're trying to bring your elbow up toward the sky. And that was 30 seconds. So now we're going to relax and we're going to do the other side. Let's just pause the clock. I'm not going to take you through it step by step because by now you guys should already know what to do. If you don't know what to do, just pause the video, go back to the first stretch and go through the instructions one more time. But 30 seconds starting now. So up and over the head. And just remember, I'll instruct you guys now what to do. So remember, we want to maintain retroversion of the pelvis. That way we put the thoracolumbar fascia under tension, which creates more myofascial tension on the latissimus dorsi. And then we want to go into as much flexion, abduction, and lateral rotation at the glenohumeral joint as possible. We're doing a contralateral flexion of the trunk by bending away, ipsilateral rotation by rotating toward the side we're stretching. And that was perfect, 30 seconds on the dot. Let's do the other side now. This is pass number 2. You guys know how many passes we're doing? If you do, comment down below. Let's see if you've been paying attention these last 16 days. 30 seconds starting now. So we're bending away, rotating toward. And come out of it. We're going to do the other side. Just switch legs. 30 seconds starting now. And remember, the 30 seconds starts as soon as you get into the final position. If it takes you 20 seconds to set up, you're not just stretching for 10 seconds. You're stretching for 30 seconds after the 20 seconds of setup time. The first time that you do these, it might take you a little bit longer to set up. Once you get really familiar with the stretches, you should be able to set up within less than 5 seconds. I haven't been looking at the clock during my setup time, but I'll look at it right now as soon as I hit play. So we got 30 seconds starting now. And it took me 2 seconds to set up. When you get really familiar with these stretches, it shouldn't take you too long. At the beginning, because you're trying to remember all of the moving parts, it may take you a little bit longer because you're not just focusing on the lat. Again, this is a global stretch. You are actively going into retroversion of the pelvis to put the thoracolumbar fascia under tension to transfer into the latissimus dorsi, which is going to transfer into the entire posterior aspect of the posterior chain. And we got one more. In case you guys did not know how many passes, it is 3 passes on each side. So 30 seconds starting now. And let's come out of it. And that is it for the myofascial stretching exercise for the latissimus dorsi. The third stretch is going to be for the long head of the triceps brachii, and this one right over here, it's similar to the latissimus dorsi stretch. The main difference is with the triceps stretch, we are focusing on the long head, and the long head, what does it do? It does shoulder extension because it crosses the shoulder posteriorly, and it does elbow extension. So we want to go into maximum flexion at the glenohumeral joint and maximum flexion at the elbow. With the lat stretch, we weren't really concerned with the flexion of the elbow. With the triceps stretch, we are very concerned with the flexion of the elbow. So that is the main difference with regard to the arm position. It's going to look very similar from the front, but that is the biggest difference. And the other thing too is because we are focusing on the long head of the tricep and not the medial or the lateral head, we want to maintain a neutral hand position. So when our hand is behind us, it is neutral. We're not going into supination. We're not going into pronation. Neutral position. For this one right over here, once again, we want to create as much myofascial tension along the posterior chain as possible. So to do this one, what we want to do is we are going to get into a kneeling position and we are going to sit down onto our calves. By sitting down onto our calves, we're going to be able to create more of a retroversion of the pelvis, which is going to put the thoracolumbar fascia under tension, which is going to put the lats under tension, which is going to transfer into the posterior shoulder, which is going to transfer into the proximal attachment of the long head of the triceps. And then from there, we want to go into maximum flexion. So try and get your forearm to touch your bicep. And then with this one, we're pulling across, and we also want to push back so we get that maximum flexion. The difference though with this one too is with this one, the intention is we are imagining that we are trying to project our elbow superiorly. So imagine that somebody has a string attached to your elbow and they are trying to yank you up toward the sky. But we're doing the exact same thing. And for this one, if we want to get a little bit extra myofascial tension, we could do a contralateral cervical flexion. So we are going to do a side bend of the cervical spine by bending away, and then ipsilateral rotation by looking toward the side that we're stretching. But we've got 30 seconds starting now. So really maintain that retroversion of the pelvis. Really focus on pulling that elbow across your body and keeping it behind your ear. You want as much flexion as possible to enhance the stretch. Push the elbow up to the sky, and you could do that contralateral side bend of the cervical spine with the ipsilateral rotation. All of those will enhance the effects of the stretch. All right, now we're going to do set number 2, or set number 1 for the opposite side, starting now. Try and get as much flexion of that elbow as possible. Again, the triceps, the long head of the triceps brachii, the two main actions are shoulder extension and elbow extension. So we want to get maximum shoulder flexion and elbow flexion. Those are, if you remember two things, just remember those two. Those are the two most important actions for this stretch. Set number 2 starting now, 30 seconds. So from the front, it may look different. The only difference is we're not in a half kneeling position. We are in a kneeling, and we're going to be seated. And with this one, the intention, we are focusing a lot more on elbow flexion. With the lat stretch, we weren't really concerned with elbow flexion. And the reason we are doing triceps is because we hit the triceps quite a bit too. When we ended up doing the shoulder extension, so the pull-ups, we were using the long head of the triceps. And when we ended up doing the reverse cable flies, we were isometrically training the elbow extensors or the triceps. So we want to get a nice stretch in there because we trained them pretty hard, so we're going to relax in 30 seconds starting now. So really pull that elbow across and push that elbow back. Keep it behind the midline of the body. The more flexion of the shoulder you could get and the more flexion of the elbow you can get, the better. But don't neglect pushing the elbow up to the sky. You're not pulling the elbow up to the sky with the opposite arm. You're actively pushing the elbow up. Think of it as active decompression. So imagine somebody's pulling you, only they're not pulling you. You are pushing yourself up. And we got one more pass, 30 seconds starting now. One more thing that you can do that I've mentioned this in other videos, but you want to look down with your eyes. By looking down with your eyes, you're going to put the dura mater under tension, and by putting the dura mater under tension, it's just going to help a little bit because it's going to, everything is connected, right? So even, it may not seem like that big of a deal, but every little thing that you could do is going to compound on itself. The retroversion of the pelvis by itself isn't going to make a huge difference, but when you combine the retroversion with the tall spine, with the shoulder flexion, all of those things compound on one another. Think of the video that I made on the concept of passive insufficiency. Whenever you have a multi-joint muscle, what's going to happen is if you maximally stretch the muscle at one joint, you cannot maximally stretch it at the other joint as well. So with your hamstring crosses your hip and your knee. At the hip, it attaches to the ischial tuberosity, and then at the knee, it attaches to the tibia. So if we were to maximally flex the hip, I can bring my knee so that it touches my chest, but there's no way I'm going to be able to straighten out my knee when my thigh is in full flexion because it's being stretched at both ends. That's the concept of passive insufficiency. Whereas if I release the tension at the proximal attachment, now I have no problem straightening out my knee. But when my knee is completely straight, there's no way I'm getting my thigh to my chest. So that is the concept of the myofascial tension when we perform all of the myofascial stretching exercises, is we want to create maximum myofascial tension by doing everything along the side that we are stretching. But we got one more, 30 seconds, starting now. And congratulations, you guys have successfully completed day 16 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Comment down below, let me know what you guys thought of today's workout and the stretching routine. If you guys have any questions or comments, comment down below. But that is it for day 16 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.